The German Shepherd wasn't supposed to bark, not in court, not today, but he did. And the sound, it wasn't loud, it wasn't feral or threatening. It was low, like a question, like a ghost had touched his nose and vanished. Gasps rippled through the oak-paneled courtroom. The judge's gavel froze mid-air. Every camera lens shifted focus. The murmurs began before the silence had even fully settled. The dog, codename Bravo 7, sat perfectly still in the witness box, next to the handler who had escorted him in. His ears were alert, his eyes locked forward, but not at the judge. Not at the plaintiff's table, not even at the blind man seated behind the defense. No, Bravo 7 stared at the cane the veteran held with trembling hands. "Let the record show," the clerk whispered into her mic, her voice tight with tension, "that the K9 made a voluntary sound." It was meant to be a routine hearing, a custody transfer of a retired military dog. The man, Staff Sergeant Harold Kane, was once Bravo 7's handler, but blindness and discharge paperwork had separated them years ago. The department claimed Kane no longer met the legal threshold to adopt a service animal. Liability, logistics, protocol. The court wasn't here to decide if they loved each other, only if the law allowed them to be together. But when Bravo barked, the room shifted. Harold's chin tilted slightly like he was listening for something in the walls. His fingers tightened on the cane. That bark. It wasn't supposed to happen. Bravo had been silent through the whole testimony, quiet even when Harold walked in. The attorney leaned in toward the judge. "Your Honor, that was perhaps just an instinct, a coincidence." But even he didn't sound convinced. Bravo had served in over 14 missions. He'd saved lives, detected bombs, tracked insurgents through heat-slick sand. He had never, not once, barked without reason. Now 3 years after retirement, he barked in a courtroom at his old handler. Harold's lips moved, barely. Is he still there?" The bailiff, unsure, nodded slowly. "Yes, sir, he's here. Can I—" His breath caught. "Can I hold him? Just once?" There was silence, legal silence, emotional silence, the kind that isn't written into courtroom transcripts. The judge's jaw worked quietly behind his glasses. He didn't look at his papers. He looked at the dog, then at the man, then back again. "Make an exception," someone whispered from the back row. It wasn't clear who said it first. Then the judge spoke. "Let him approach." The room didn't breathe as Harold stood. He didn't walk, he felt his way forward, his way, the tip of his cane tapping against polished marble. The dog didn't move, but his tail, it began to wag. Just slightly, one side, then the other. Slow, unsure. Like the way old friends nod at each other across a room, unsure if time has changed. "Them?" Harold knelt, his knees cracked with the weight of years. He lowered the cane, reached out his hand. "Bravo," he said, barely above a whisper. No command, no trick, just the name. The dog leaned forward, sniffed the hand, then nudged his head under it, as if it was always meant to be there, as if no years had passed, and then he whimpered. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to draw tears from strangers. The same war-hardened dog who'd faced IEDs and sniper fire whimpered like a child. Harold's fingers gripped the fur around Bravo's neck. He didn't cry. Not yet. His mouth tightened, like the sobs were in his throat, stuck behind memories he wasn't ready to face. "You remembered," he whispered. "Beat. You damn old thing. You remembered me." The defense attorney stepped forward. "Your Honor, given this reaction, I believe further evaluation is warranted." But the judge didn't respond immediately. He was watching something. Bravo wasn't looking at Harold anymore. He was looking past him, past the jury, past the people, past the clerk, to the far back row where a man in a dark coat had just walked in. The dog's ears rose again, but no growl came, no bark, just a single, frozen stare. Then a tremor in his body, not fear, recognition, and something else. The judge frowned. "Who just entered?" But before anyone could answer, Bravo leapt. He didn't lunge toward Harold. He didn't bark. He didn't attack. He ran straight toward the man in the coat and stopped dead at his feet. The man froze. Everyone froze. Then Bravo sat and looked back at Harold, as if waiting, as if saying, "You need to know something." The courtroom's murmurs had long faded, yet the tremor in Major Raymond Cole's hands still betrayed the storm inside him. The scent of waxed oak benches and cold marble brought no comfort. Somewhere in front of him the judge was still speaking, but all Raymond heard was pause. Soft, deliberate paw steps on gravel. It wasn't just a memory, it was the memory. 13 years ago, Kandahar province. The sun had been merciless that day. Bleached sand bit into his boots as Major Cole moved through the abandoned village, his M4 at the ready, and sweat tracing thin lines down his spine. And just ahead, tail low, ears forward, was Valor, a sable-coated German shepherd, trained for explosives and silent signals, assigned to Cole in a twist of military paperwork, but bonded far beyond protocol. That village, once vibrant, had become ghostly. Children's toys half buried in dust, doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. But Valor didn't hesitate. He moved like a shadow, halting by an old well. One paw lifted. Then he sat. That was the signal. Raymond whispered into his mic. "Tripwire." "Where's perimeter?" But before backup could reach, a scream cracked through the still air. A child's scream. Without waiting, Raymond sprinted toward the sound. And Valor. He bolted in first. Later, all anyone could agree on was that something didn't make sense. The tripwire didn't trigger. The explosive cache was found intact, and the child, she vanished before they could question her. Locals claimed they'd never seen her before, but the image stuck. Valor standing between Raymond and that child, hackles raised, unmoving. That was the first time Raymond realized the dog wasn't just trained to protect. He chose to protect. Back. In court, Raymond's hands clenched the wooden armrest. His cane rested across his lap, but it felt heavier today, not from wood, but from truth. There was more to Kandahar, more he never told anyone, not even during debriefing, not to the Pentagon and not to Valor. Years later, the final patrol Valor's service didn't end in Kandahar. 2 more deployments followed. Valor saved 6 soldiers during a roadside ambush, detected IEDs on a convoy route no tech could pick up. But one night changed everything. Ramadi, 2012. Valor had refused to board the lead transport vehicle, flat out refused. He'd stared at Raymond with those haunting amber eyes and sat. Raymond had laughed. "Getting lazy on me, old boy." He gave a gentle tug on Valor's collar. The shepherd growled. Low, warning. Still, orders were orders. Raymond sent the team. Ahead with a reluctant Valor finally obeying, yet still glancing back. Minutes later, a detonation. No survivors, just fire, and a collar torn loose in the sand. Raymond never forgave himself. The dog had known. The dog had known. Back in the courtroom, Raymond's eyes, blind now from degenerative retinal nerve damage, stared blankly ahead. But his mind was full of color. Fire reds, sand golds, and the unmistakable black-gold shimmer of Valor's fur. After Ramadi, Valor was retired. Raymond fought bureaucracy for 6 months to adopt him, and they spent 4 golden years together. In silence, healing, until the day the dog was taken away. It started with a letter, a misfiled asset claim. The DoD had flagged Valor as part of an experimental unit, one that shouldn't have been released for civilian adoption. Raymond fought it. Hard. Letters, hearings, protests. They took Valor anyway, and 2 years later, the letter came again. But this time it wasn't a recall, it was a subpoena. Valor had been reactivated and was now the key witness in a controversial military court case. The absurdity still made Raymond grimace. A dog. A witness. But what hurt most wasn't the legal angle. It was the silence. No updates, no contact, no word if Valor was safe, or if he even remembered. And now, sitting in this courtroom years later, Raymond had only one request, to hold him, just once. As he waited, The prosecutor's voice echoed, crisp and rehearsed. "Mr. Cole, your testimony today will not impact the classified elements of the case. You are here solely under compassionate grounds." Raymond nodded, swallowing a bitterness he hadn't tasted since Ramadi. Understood. But what he didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that this wasn't about testimony. It was about memory, a shared one that no file, no court, and no military regulation could erase. The bailiff opened the door, and Raymond's breath caught. He couldn't see, but he knew. Every hair on his arm stood on end. The paw steps, not hurried, not hesitant, measured, purposeful, familiar. There was no leash, no handler's voice, just presence. Raymond's cane slipped from his grasp, and then a pause, a long one, as if the whole courtroom was waiting to see if the dog remembered him at all. The bond rekindles, but something's off. Clues stir, hearts tighten. The pause stopped just inches away. Raymond didn't move. His hands, calloused and trembling, hovered mid-air, uncertain, suspended between hope and heartbreak. He wasn't sure if he should reach first or wait to be chosen again. The courtroom, once filled with whispers and coughs, fell into a sacred stillness. It was the kind of silence usually reserved for funerals or battlefield prayers, and then a nose, cold, damp, familiar, pressed gently into his palm. Raymond exhaled sharply, not a sob, not quite a laugh, just a man releasing years of pain. All at once, his hand traveled slowly, cautiously over the fur. The patterns hadn't changed. That scar above the left ear, from shrapnel in Fallujah. The small dip near the spine, from where Valor once fell 3 stories during a mission and walked away like a ghost. "You're here," Raymond whispered, but Valor didn't nuzzle, didn't wag, didn't whine in that low, soul-scraping way he used to. He stood completely still, almost like he was listening, not to Raymond, but to the room. "Is he sedated?" Raymond asked aloud, his voice cracking. The judge leaned forward. "No, Major, that's his natural behavior under court protocol. The animal has been reconditioned for high-security environments. He doesn't respond to emotional cues anymore." Raymond's face twitched. Reconditioned. They meant rewritten, like a memory erased frame by frame until only the shell remained. He almost said something, but stopped. Because deep in Raymond's chest was a war he didn't want to fight. This wasn't his Valor. Not yet, but he hadn't left. The dog hadn't pulled away. There was still something. The handler, a young lieutenant with a clipboard and 2 clean boots, spoke cautiously. "He's logged under K9 419 now. We call him Shadow. He was reintroduced into service 2 years ago for classified ops. He hasn't failed a command since." "Shadow?" Raymond echoed. The word hit like a boot to the ribs. Valor was never a shadow. He stood in the way of shadows. But still. Something in the dog's posture flickered when Raymond said his old name. Just the twitch of an ear, a subtle turn of the head, a memory spark. Or a glitch. Raymond dared. He leaned closer and whispered, "Lay down, soldier." The courtroom tensed. The handler shot a look toward the judge, but the judge lifted a hand, signaling silence. They watched. Valor blinked. Then slowly, cautiously, he lowered to the floor. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused mid-keystroke. That wasn't part of Shadow's training. Not anymore. That was Valor's command. Raymond felt his throat tighten. He tried again. Turn. The shepherd didn't move, but his eyes flicked past Raymond, to the far left bench. The gallery, toward someone who hadn't spoken a word. The woman with the thick manila folder. Raymond tilted his head. "Who's she?" The who. Lieutenant shifted. "Civilian consultant, behavioral analyst for the court, evaluating K9 responses for admissible evidence." Raymond's breath caught again. Something didn't sit right. The dog knew her, but not with affection, not fear either. Something colder. Recognition. He reached again, his fingers lightly grazing Valor's muzzle, and just beneath the fur, hidden, near the jawline, was a small bump. A surgical scar. He traced it, and the shepherd didn't flinch. But something in Raymond's memory did. Years ago, he'd fought against chip implants, Not just for tracking, but for behavioral overrides. Whispers. Of tech being tested on advanced K9s. For their safety. They'd claimed he hadn't believed it until now. You didn't choose silence, did you? Raymond whispered. They programmed it into you. The judge cleared his throat, pulling everyone back to the moment. Major, please remember. This is not a criminal hearing. The animal was entered as part of evidentiary procedure. I'm not accusing, Raymond interrupted, rising shakily to his feet, hand still resting on Valor's back. I'm remembering. Beat. And so is he. Another test. Raymond took a breath. He murmured the old field phrase. One only they used on night missions. Echo Blue, stand fast. For a second, nothing. Then, like thunder rolling low through his bones, the shepherd growled. Low, controlled, ancient. A battlefield growl. Raymond's legs nearly gave out. Not from fear, from recognition. That growl wasn't for him. It was aimed toward the woman in the gallery, the consultant. The only one in the room who didn't flinch, who expected it. Beat, and didn't react. Raymond steadied himself. He almost said something, but stopped. Because the truth was only just beginning to rise. Something was wrong, not just with Valor, with the entire case. A flicker of memory returned. That girl in Kandahar. The one Valor shielded. The mission files never added up. The child vanished. The detonation didn't match insurgent patterns. What if Valor remembered something they didn't? What if the reason he was brought into this courtroom wasn't just as a witness, but as a key, to unlock something buried? Raymond reached out one last time. He whispered low, not for the court, not for the judge, but for the dog who had once saved his life more times than he could count. Valor. If you know something, show me. And then the shepherd turned, not toward Raymond, not toward the handler, but toward the woman. He took 2 steps forward and sat, exactly like he did the day he found the tripwire. The handler stiffened. That's the alert posture. The analyst's eyes narrowed. Raymond turned slowly toward the bench. Judge, he said quietly, you might want to ask what's in that file. The court exploded into confusion. Security moved. Voices clashed, but Raymond heard only one sound, a tail thumping once then twice and against the wooden floor. For the first time in years. Valor wagged his tail. The judge pounded the gavel, but the sound barely registered beneath the rising tension in the room. The woman with the file, Dr. Evelyn Marks, stood slowly. Her eyes met Raymond's, cold and unreadable. This court is out of order, she said calmly, but her voice didn't shake. The animal is reacting due to memory confusion, nothing more. Raymond took a step forward, leaning heavily on his cane. He's not confused. He remembers, and he knows who you are. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the manila folder. One of the security officers moved toward her, but she raised a hand. I'm not the one on trial. No, Raymond said quietly. But you should be. Everyone stared as the dog shifted his weight forward again, inching closer to Evelyn. His eyes were locked onto hers, not in aggression but in deep, searching recognition. The judge gestured to the bailiff. Retrieve the file. Evelyn hesitated, just for a moment. But that pause spoke louder than anything else. The folder was taken, opened. Inside were sealed documents marked classified and a worn photograph clipped to one corner. Raymond's breath caught. It was the girl. The child from Kandahar, the one Valor had protected, but her face wasn't frightened. She was smiling, standing beside a man, an American, and behind them, Evelyn Marks, years younger, wearing civilian clothes in a combat zone. The courtroom. Murmurs swelled into gasps. She was never just a consultant, Raymond said. You were there. Evelyn's mask cracked for just a second. You don't understand what we were trying to do. Valor stepped closer, muscles tight but controlled. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply sat, right in front of Evelyn. Watching her. That's his final signal, Raymond said. That's what he does when he finds the source. The judge looked up sharply. Source of what? Corruption, Raymond said. Betrayal. He was trained for it, to identify more than explosives or hostiles. He could read deception. That's what made him special. That's what they tried to erase. Valor lowered his head slowly, his eyes never leaving Evelyn. The silence was suffocating. Then Evelyn said, "He wasn't supposed to survive that last mission." A shiver moved through the courtroom. Raymond's voice dropped. "You tried to bury him with the truth." "And yet here he is," she whispered. Security closed in on her. She didn't resist. She just looked down at the shepherd with something between hate and regret. As she was escorted out, Valor didn't move. He simply looked back at Raymond. And this time there was no hesitation. He stepped forward, rested his head against Raymond's leg and exhaled, the soft, low breath of a soldier finally home. Raymond knelt, wincing but determined. "You found the truth, boy," he whispered into his fur, "and you brought it back." The courtroom remained frozen in awe, a blind veteran and his dog, once broken, now whole, but deep inside both of them. They knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The courtroom emptied slowly, but Raymond didn't move, neither did Valor. Even as the murmurs turned to silence and the air lost its edge, Raymond kept one hand on the dog's thick neck, grounding himself. He could feel the tremble beneath Valor's fur, not fear but restraint. Like something old had been disturbed inside him, something that was never supposed to surface again. A gentle hand touched Raymond's shoulder. It was Officer Lena from the courthouse staff. She knelt beside him, her voice low. "Sir, I know. This wasn't easy, but the judge wants to see you in chambers, privately." Raymond gave a faint nod, but before rising, he whispered into Valor's ear. "You coming with me, partner?" The shepherd responded with a soft grunt and rose slowly. His limp was more visible now. That old injury in his back right leg, the one that had ended his service. Together they followed Lena down the side hallway. Inside chambers, the judge sat behind a heavy oak desk, sleeves rolled up, a single lamp casting amber shadows across a wall lined with medals and framed documents. But he didn't look at them. He looked only at Valor. "You said something out there, Mr. Royce," the judge began slowly. "Something about the dog's final signal. The sitting." Raymond nodded. "It was used in advanced intel cases, not common. But Valor was trained under a separate branch. They taught him how to detect intent, especially when something wasn't matching the scene." The judge leaned back. "That's beyond ordinary K9 protocol." "I know," Raymond said. "They buried the training logs, same as they tried to bury his last mission." The judge pulled out a drawer, handed Raymond a document. It wasn't classified. Not anymore. It was a debrief form, Operation Obsidian Rain. The last mission Raymond and Valor ever took together. Raymond's fingers trembled as he read. He remembered every detail except one that now appeared in black and white. Handler was removed prematurely. K9 remained in zone. Witnessed civilian engagement. Outcome suppressed. Raymond's lips parted, barely able to speak. "I wasn't pulled out for injury," he said. "I was pulled out to keep me from seeing." "What she did?" The judge nodded grimly. "She used the op as cover. She needed you out of the way." Valor sat down at Raymond's feet again. He didn't move, just stared at the door as if he still expected something or someone to walk through it. The judge folded his hands. "There's going to be an investigation. People will want answers. But today none of that matters more than this," he pointed to Valor. He didn't forget, not the place, not the girl, not the betrayal. Raymond swallowed the lump in his throat. He remembered because I couldn't. Outside, dusk had settled over the city. Raymond walked out with Valor beside him, their shadows stretching long across the pavement. As they reached the courthouse, steps. A small figure stepped forward from the crowd that had gathered outside. A girl, maybe 18, brown eyes, nervous hands. She didn't speak, just reached into her pocket and pulled out a silver badge on a worn lanyard. It was military issued. She handed it to Raymond. "I think this was yours," she said quietly. Raymond's eyes widened. He remembered now. She was the girl from Kandahar grown alive, the one he thought he'd failed. "You kept it all this time?" he asked. She nodded. "He gave it to me, the dog, after you were taken out. He stayed with me for hours, until they came." Valor looked up at her, tail giving a single deliberate wag. Raymond closed his hand around the badge. No more redacted files. No more buried truth. The memory wasn't broken. It had just been waiting. And now, after all the years, all the silence, the courtroom, the tears, the dog had delivered it home. That night, Raymond didn't sleep. Not because of pain, not because of ghosts, but because for the first time in years, the silence wasn't empty anymore. Valor lay beside his bed in the guest room Lena had offered him, his breathing steady, his ears occasionally twitching in dreams. The way he used to rest after long missions, as if still watching over something no one else could see. Raymond sat by the window. He held the silver badge in his palm, running his thumb over the faded letters. Everything had changed, but everything had stayed the same. The next morning he rose before sunrise and took Valor to the old memorial park, the one where they'd held the dedication ceremony after Operation Obsidian Rain. Back then, Valor had stood still as a statue beside the engraved names. Today his steps were slower, more deliberate. Raymond stood before the wall of names. Some of them he'd never even known. Some of them had been buried twice, once in war and once in the lies that followed. He took the badge and hung it on a small hook that someone had welded beneath the main plaque. It wasn't standard protocol, but it felt right. Valor sat down beside him. Not out of training, not out of command, but choice. A soft breeze passed through the park, lifting the tips of the flags that lined the stone path. Raymond turned to go, but Valor didn't move. He looked up at the wall, then looked at Raymond, then back again, as if there was still something he needed to say. Raymond stepped closer, following his gaze, and then he saw it. A small patch of stone, darker than the rest, recently cleaned, still wet. Someone had been here before them, and whoever it was, they'd knelt long enough for the grass to flatten. The girl, she had come, not for justice, but to remember. Raymond felt the ache in his chest shift, not as pain, but as release. He touched the badge once more, and finally whispered the words that had waited too long. "You did it, boy, you brought it all back." Valor rose, circled him once, then sat again, this time facing the path they'd come from, watching, waiting. Raymond turned toward the road. They walked slowly, side by side, as the morning light began to spread across the sky, and just before they reached the gate, Valor paused, ears perked. A child's voice echoed faintly from the path. "Mom, look, it's the hero dog." Raymond smiled but said nothing. Valor turned once more to glance at the wall, then continued walking. No fanfare, no salute, just a dog who remembered everything and chose to forgive anyway. Do you think he waited all these years because he remembered, or because he knew Raymond would need to?